guys, here I'm going through a carburetor that it was on the Nova. Let me show you some things about it. It was giving me a little bit of trouble. It's a Barry Grant. You can see these inserts here, makes it kind of unique. And then the float bowls, they take the smaller style inlet there. I'm going to begin taking this thing apart. Fairly certain that it had a crack in a float. This thing's older and it still had brass floats in it. Something you don't normally see. Plastic floats don't usually give you that problem, but anyway, you can see me here just kind of going through it, just taking a glance at everything and breaking it down. When you're going through a carburetor like this, I mean, Holley 4150 style carburetors, that's what this is. About the most common racing carburetor you're ever going to see, but I've been through them a few times. Wouldn't call myself a carburetor expert, but I always try and lay everything separately and where I can see it all. And yeah, you can show you this smaller inlet tube here, which makes it where you can't swap it with another carburetor, which is what I tried to do before. But anyway, 4150 style stuff, you still want to, lay everything out as you take it apart. Make sure there's nothing different front to back, left to right, and then take note of how you got it set up to begin with so you can go back together with it the same way. But you see, I'm just kind of looking through, making sure nothing's fell out of place. I'm looking up in the inlet that goes to the needle and seat on the carburetor, make sure there's nothing stuck up in there, nothing weird causing any kind of fuel delivery. 5/16 nut driver here, the yellow one, most valuable one to keep around, fits all these and most hose clamps. Looks like we got a little fuel left over in that one, in the front bowl. The rear was dry, and I can't remember if that's because we already had it apart or if we had a needle and seat problem where we weren't getting the fuel that we needed. Like I said, each of these bolts has got a little washer on it. You got to make sure they're in good shape. Most of the time you can reuse them, but if it's been sitting a long time or if they're not made of the good plastic type, they'll give you a little trouble and leak. So I always make sure that they're not stuck in the bowl of the carburetor. And if they're still on the bowl, I want to make sure they look good before I decide to replace them. Here I get to beat on it like a barbarian because it's stuck for some reason. I probably over-torqued it a little bit. Making sure that the accelerator linkage is not keeping it bound up for some reason or another. Try not to pry on these things when you can. Also, try not to beat on them with a hammer if you don't have to, but sometimes they get a little stuck with the gaskets. There's a little place right there made to pry it apart, but even that's not working. So I'll probably get fed up here. Yep, and knock that right off of there. So always visually inspecting everything. You can see right there that little bit of light. It's got a glass sight in the side of it rather than having to take a plug out to set your float level. That's pretty convenient. But I test the accelerator pump there, give it a little squirt, make sure it's working. Everything else seems to look pretty good there in the front bowl. Nothing crazy out of place. A little bit of residue, but other than that, everything's in place and nothing weird. These are the metering blocks, and there's your power valve. Make sure nothing's stuck there. I thought about taking the metering block off, but it's pretty well sealed too, and I don't think that's where our problem is. I'm putting it in the same place there, and if it doesn't just pop off, I'm giving up on that. It's not giving us any trouble. We're going to leave it together. Here I'm popping out the jet to see what's in it because I haven't built this carburetor before. And you can see it. There's a couple different types of jets. If they have the flat blade in it, or you can put a screwdriver or a jet tool in it, that's a Holley jet, and they have a numbering system. These came out to be 65s. I'm trying to show you, but I don't think it'll focus good enough. But there's a number right there on the side that shows you what type of jet it is. As far as a number, that's a Holley 65. But if they are hex type, fancy looking jets, that's what's called a precision jet. And the number on a precision jet is not on a chart. That's how many thousandths the size hole is. So if it was a 65 precision jet, that would mean that the hole was 65 thousandths. So I'm putting this back where I got it and make sure, give it some decent torque there. Don't round it off, it's just brass. But I'm taking a second just to make sure I don't see anything stupid. So far I don't. Like I said, most of our issues seem to be with the rear bowl. Those tubes sticking up there, those are the vent tubes. And no matter what I did as far as float adjustment, they seem to still overrun, which kind of gives you an indication that you've got either a bad needle and seat or a sunk float or a stuck float. I had it off a couple of times at the track to verify that, and I'll show you what I found there, but it was tough to really pinpoint it. This is the same as the front, just taking all the bolts out, making sure that the gaskets are good on the bolts and make sure there's nothing weird looking or different. Same deal, I got a beat on this to get it to pop off because I torqued the crap out of it. Looks like I've never hit anything with a hammer before. Same deal, this bolt's dry. And it was dry, I believe once we figured out what was going on at the track, most of the way we dumped the fuel out of it, didn't crank it. But this is what the inside of that looks like. That's your brass float. Like I said, brass is kind of outdated, and it's kind of for this reason. Brass will corrode and plastic will not. I was kind of expecting, and I'll show you here in a little bit, I was kind of expecting there to be a rotted hole in it because these floats are sealed up with what they're going to call flux. And a lot of times it'll rot out where they did that, or the brass itself will start to leak. Just get a hole in it. I'm pulling the jet out of the back just to make sure it's the same, and it turns out that it is 65 as well. Same kind of deal all the way around. It says 65 right there on the side. So I said earlier, this thing had removable inserts, those brass pieces in the top, in the Venturi. That's to make it a 390. I've been led to believe that you could buy a kit to take this same carburetor body and push those out and push in bigger spacers to make it either a 650 or a 750 or whatever you want. It's a pretty neat idea. I'm assuming you have to have some kind of a special tool to do that. I do not. But it's a 390 right now, which explains the jet sizing and the fact that when I got it, the rear accelerator pump was actually not working, and that was by design because on a 390, you're not going to flow enough air to usually need that. I hooked it up to try it, but it really didn't make a ton of difference as far as performance. I'm going to take your float out, confirm what I thought if I can, and show you guys as well. I'm doing this a little bit backwards. I'm taking the screws out of the float bowl thinking it'll fall out around the needle and seat, but actually it won't. Kind of got ahead of myself, but once I get that figured out, I'll pull the needle and seat out and show you what I'm talking about there, and then the float will almost fall out. Another thing to note, on most, if not all, Holly style carburetors, the needle and seat is adjusted with a flat blade screwdriver and a 5/8 wrench. A 5/8 hex is what threads all that up out of there. And I'll show that to you here. It's also brass. There's an O-ring, and then if you see that little plumb bob looking thing right there, that is the needle, and it presses up against the seat. And when the float goes up, it presses that little needle up and stops fuel flow. So if you have a sunk float, it stays wide open and overruns out of the vent like I had. Or if you have a stuck float stuck up, essentially it thinks it's full. It's not letting any fuel come up that little tube there and fill the bowl. So you can have it starve you for fuel or overfuel for you either way. Here I am, I got that float out. I'm inspecting the bottom of it to see, because when we had it before, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little flux area right there where they usually, either somebody patched it or that's factory. This is actually the front bowl, so nothing really wrong with that one. But once we get around to the other, you'll see what I'm talking about. You can test floats, which is what I tried to do before, by sinking them in essentially fuel or water, but it's really tough to get it to happen just sitting there, because there's no way for that fluid, if you submerge the float in that way, to actually vent out of the float to get it to fill up all the time. And who knows, I could be wrong, but you'll see what I'm looking at, and it was acting like it in every way. And the needle in the seat looked perfectly good. There's no trash in it, it's free. That one's just a little bit sticky, but I think it's just because it was dry there. But no matter what I did, the float adjustment did not seem to make much of a difference. Put it back together a couple times, did the same thing. This one does have some residue too. I'm kind of raking that out and making sure it's not like dirt. It's probably just oxidized fuel left over. Always a good idea too to be careful with all these things, because a lot of these nice carburetors are aluminum, but a bunch of them are pot metal. They're really not made of much. So you cross thread something, it's a small fine thread hole, it gives you trouble, stuff falls apart. And the metal just can't take a lot of torque sometimes too. It'll either pull the threads, or sometimes if you've got the wrong bolt in the wrong hole or something to that effect, you'll break meter and block, or break the body, or break a bolt off in it, and it's just a lot of trouble. So just be gentle with this type of metal. Unless it's a full aluminum billet carburetor or something, it's a little bit fragile, soft metal. So here's what I suspect to be a crack. I don't really know if you can see it or not, but it's right there along that edge, and it's the only mark on either float like that. It's in the corner. I don't have a clue what would cause one to crack like that. Like I said before, I was expecting a hole or some kind of a rot, but that almost looks like a split on the end. And that was the only place I could get it. Here I am kind of mashing it down to see if I can get that crack to open up to verify that's what it was. But either way, I'm really just kind of doing this for the hell of it, because the right thing to do here is to put 2 plastic modern floats back in the carburetor and have it sitting on the shelf as a spare. Because other than that, it seemed to operate fine. It's not corroded really bad inside. The jetting's a little less than the carburetor I've got on there now, but it's a good little carburetor. It just had this little bit of trouble with us. Once again, I'm going to attribute that to me letting it sit for a while. And there's moisture in pretty much all fuel. I don't care what you say, race gas, new or old, especially the longer you let it sit. So this could be something to do with moisture. For all I know, the thing froze one time. I have no idea. I've seen some strange stuff as far as water and moisture, different temperatures, and stuff you wouldn't think would be a problem. But this one's kind of strange to me. Maybe some carburetor people have seen it 1,000 times, but this is the first one that I've seen that's been like a crack rather than just a rotted hole or just a leaking. Sometimes the floats are up and down, or 2 pieces, so sometimes they leak where they're put together. Yep, toss that aside. That little spring I showed you just a second ago, that actually keeps the float from hanging down and getting bound up. It kind of floats. It kind of hangs in there and bounces a little bit on that spring, and that helps it make where the fuel is the thing. It's moving it up and down rather than gravity. Here I am taking the other one apart and taking the rod and spring out of it, so if I ever get me some good floats, I can use all these same parts and zip it right back together and have a good carburetor. So anyway, things look pretty good here. Nothing crazy. I'm just kind of laying it all out there so I don't lose all my stuff. And that's just a typical teardown of a 4150 style carburetor, whether it be a Holley or in this case a Berry Grand, or same thing, and a 2-barrel, 350s, 400s, 500s, 350s and 500s, stuff like that. They're all the same, except they've got half as many bowls, just got a front half, and it's all the same situation there. So this would pretty much apply to that. It's what you're going to see if you ever do tear one apart. And like I said, just be gentle with them. Make sure you keep all your parts laid out there, and you can kind of trip your way through a carb inspection, and you can call it a rebuild if you do it. And that's kind of what I'm into. Definitely not a carb guru, but I've had a few apart to make sure everything's working. Here's all my parts laid out, a good view of the whole situation. Anyway, just kind of messing with that and figured I'd keep you guys posted. Thanks.